Hello and welcome to Daily News Capsule. So let's straight go through the various important news that have appeared in the newspaper of today. So the first news that is coming your way is in the form of an article written by Pinaki Chakrabarti, who is an economist and former director of National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi. Now, this news article is related to the fiscal health of the various states in India. And the article tries to analyze that to what extent the states have tried to control fiscal and revenue deficit within their respective state governments. So let's straight away go through the article. Now, the article tries to analyze that what has been the situation with respect to fiscal deficit and revenue deficit, as I said earlier, with respect to the state administration, and also tries to factor in the effect of COVID-19 and what has been the scenario post COVID-19. So, as the point says by the author, that we have completed the first quarter of fiscal year 2023-24, and it is becoming evident that the increase in general government deficit and debt that occurred during COVID-19 pandemic has begun to recede. There have been significant post-pandemic fiscal corrections at the union and state levels. At the union level, the fiscal deficit declined from 9.1% of GDP in 2021 to 5.9% in 2023-24. BE here stands for budgetary estimates. So as you can see that there has been a decline in fiscal deficit, specifically calculated from the year 2020-21. This was the time when the pandemic was, you can say, at its peak, to 5.9% of in the budgetary estimates in 2023-24. All states' fiscal deficit was 4.1% of the GDP in 2020-21. It declined to 3.24% of the GDP in 2022-23 revised estimates. For the major states for the year 2023-24, it is expected to be 2.9% of GDP. Now here lies the question that is raised by the author, that this sharp reduction in fiscal deficit suggests that we cannot have an impressionistic view, a very you can say direct view, or you can say superficial view of the fiscal situation of the country, especially on the finances of the state. So in a way, the author is questioning that how come the states are showing that their fiscal deficit has declined so drastically. The author further continues and says that the analysis here is based on the data collected from the individual budgets of 17 major states. These states are responsible for more than 90% of the combined spending of all states. Thus, fiscal issues emerging out of their budgets are representative of the state finances in India. The analysis shows that these states together have managed to contain their fiscal deficit. This fiscal deficit consolidation is significant in many ways, and here he goes on to highlight that what are the different mechanisms that have taken up by the various states which he has factored in. Now, first, the states in aggregate managed to be fiscally prudent despite a significant contraction in revenues during the peak of COVID-19. Second, emergency provision of health spending and livelihood during COVID-19 pandemic was not easy and required union-state fiscal coordination. Third, states were able to reprioritize expenditure and quickly contain the fiscal deficit. Fourth, the reduction in fiscal deficit is a combination of expenditure side adjustments, improved GST collection, and higher tax devolution due to buoyant central revenues. And lastly, non-GST revenues are also showing signs of recovery after the pandemic in most states. Meaning thereby here the author has highlighted 5 key points on the basis of which it can be shown or it can be analyzed that how the fiscal deficit scenario of the various states has been contained, or you can say has been brought under control. Now, in the next part of his article, the author tries to identify that what are the fiscal challenges. And he says that there are significant fiscal challenges that need correction in the short to medium time frame. and the most crucial being containing the revenue deficit of the states, meaning thereby revenue deficit is more problematic. Now, for the benefit of the viewers, revenue deficit means that scenario or that situation where the revenue earning of the state administration is less and revenue expenditure is more. Now, what is revenue earning and revenue expenditure? Any kind of earning which is recurrent in nature, which happens after every in a very definite span of time, again and again, that is revenue earning. For example, the rent that is received by a person from his house property would be an example of revenue earnings. Why? Because it would be on a monthly basis. Likewise, what would be the revenue expenditure? An example of this would be the granting of salaries to the employees, which again happens on a monthly basis. Now, the reduction in fiscal deficit has not been accompanied by a corresponding reduction in the revenue deficit. Now, this is an important point that is highlighted by the author, that revenue deficit has not come under control, whereas fiscal deficit to a large extent has been controlled. As in 2023-24, out of the 17 major states, 13 have deficit in the revenue account, and out of the 13 states, fiscal deficit in 7 states are primarily driven by revenue deficits. Now, the author has identified what all are these states, which states are these, and the states are Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, Kerala, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. And all these states have a large debt to GSDP ratio. GSDP is gross state domestic product. Now, in the later part of his article, he says that successive finance commissions since 12th finance commissions have identified 3 states, that is Kerala, Punjab, and West Bengal, as fiscally stressed, meaning thereby finances are not in good shape. Since 12th finance commission, this has been the assessment of the successive finance commissions. And now this number has risen to 7, which is highlighted in this part of the article, that the stressed has increased to the number of stressed states has increased to 7 measured in terms of in terms of level of revenue deficit. And what are these 7 states? The 7 states are again Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, Kerala, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. Whereas previously, in the list of financially stressed states, there were only 3 states, that is Kerala, Punjab, and West Bengal, and now the number is 7. Now, what does it mean for the general government? Macroeconomic stability. Now, a sense of this can be made when the following fiscal numbers are considered. The combined fiscal deficit of the states of these states, these 7 states, is 3.71% of GSDP, when the all state average for the same is 2.9%, meaning thereby the combined fiscal deficit of all these fiscally stressed states is higher than the state average, which stands at 2.9%. Their combined revenue deficit is 2.15% of GSDP, whereas the all state average revenue deficit is 0.78%. Their combined debt ratio is higher than the Finance Commission recommended debt ratio for all the states for the year 2023-24. Now, what is happening over here? The author is trying to prove that these 7 states are in somewhat bad fiscal shape owing to the revenue deficit, which is having a greater share in making their fiscal deficit a bit worse off. Now, what can be done? What can be done to improve the scenario in the long run? This is highlighted in the concluding part of the article. Now, on the question of revenue deficit, a long run view is also necessary. If we examine data from the last 20 years, revenue deficit has almost disappeared from state budgets before COVID-19. So to a large extent, it is COVID-19 which is the main, you can say, guilty party over here, which had compelled the states to increase their spending beyond their means, and the results are in front of us. The fiscal position of the various states are, in a bad shape, and it is all because of all credit goes to COVID-19. States in aggregate were generating revenues surplus almost all the years during this period. However, the reemergence of revenue deficit in the recent years should take the focus back on management of revenue deficit by creating an incentive compatible framework, and the following measures can be considered. So the author gives that what all he gives certain suggestions to improve the fiscal architecture of the states, specifically how to contain the revenue deficit. He says that interest-free loans to states by the union government, if continued, if they are to be given, then they should be linked to the reduction in revenue deficit. Meaning, thereby, if the state demands an interest-free loan, then from the central government, from the union government, then union government should not straight away give them the demanded loans. First, it should see that whether the concerned state government has taken some action to contain their revenue deficit or not. This will help eliminate the possibility of a substitution of states' own capital spending and also prevent the diversion of borrowed resources to finance revenue expenditure. A defined time path for revenue deficit reduction with a credible fiscal adjustment plan would help to restore fiscal balance and improve the quality of expenditure. A forward-looking performance incentive grants could also be considered for the reduction of revenue deficit. So these are all the recommendations which come from this article, and this article obviously becomes important with respect to the Indian economy component of the syllabus of the various competitive examinations. Moving forward to the next important piece of information, important piece of news is coming from the domain of science and technology. Now here this article is written by Dr. Abdul Ghafoor, who is a practicing medical professional, and this is related to the usage of emergency use of medicines and making necessary changes in the rules in this regard. Now this article begins with the story of a patient who is suffering from T-cell leukemia. But the main problem which the doctors faced was with respect to the treatment of extensively drug resistant Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Now this strain is known for its high resistance to multiple antibiotics, which which do not provide much latitude to the medical team with respect to the choice of drugs, choice of medicines that are to be given for the treatment of that particular problem. Now this is a bacteria. This Pseudomonas aeruginosa is basically a bacteria, and with respect to that particular patient, that bacteria was literally eating up the patient's face. Now to counter this scenario, to treat this problem, the medical team, they went for an innovative solution, and this part of the article details that what was that innovation that they did. Now in their quest for a lifeline, the doctors turned to a promising antibiotic, cefepime slash zidavactam. The two names are synonymous, you can say. They are for the same drug, cefepime and zidavactam, developed by Indian researchers. This antibiotic combines two active components to combat drug-resistant gram-negative pathogens, including Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Now, this drug that has been developed, it is still undergoing phase 3 trials internationally, and this Indian innovation has shown remarkable potential. Now, a drug which is going through trials, and that too in the phase 3 trials, it cannot be used or cannot be given directly to the patient. But under compassionate use protocol, the necessary approvals were taken, and the patient was given this medicine, cefepime slash zidavactam, and this showed positive results. Why? Because all the clinical markers of the patient improved. The patient's fever subsided, blood culture turned negative, and the need for oxygen diminished. And slowly and steadily, the strength of the patient, was regained. Now, Dr. Abdul Ghafoor tries to highlight this important point that emergency medical use, emergency approval of the use of these life-saving drugs should be made more, you can say, available to the patient, so that the patient and the doctors, all they both the segments have a fighting chance. Now, the challenges he identifies, Dr. Abdul Ghafoor identifies certain challenges. The challenges faced by doctors in combating drug-resistant infections are multifaceted. They must navigate through a shrinking arsenal of effective antibiotics, leaving them with limited choices and often resorting to suboptimal treatments that may have significant side effects or offer little hope of a cure. So this is the basic problem with respect to drug resistant infections. Now, what is a drug resistant infection? Please understand, it is that infection which has taken a more severe form. Why? Because the infection has developed resistance to certain antibiotics, meaning there are those antibiotics which if administered to the patient will not be giving the desired results, because the infection itself has developed immunity, if I can use the term. The infection itself has developed immunity against those drugs. Dr. Ghafoor further says that cefepime and zidebactam is a shining example of India's scientific prowess. Currently undergoing phase 3 trials, this antibiotic has demonstrated its potential to save lives, and by recognizing the importance of cefepime and zidebactam and expediting its emergency use approval, EUA's emergency use approval, we not only save lives within our borders, but also extend a helping hand around the globe to countless individuals in desperate need of effective treatment options. He cites another example of a Japanese drug, a drug that has been developed in Japan, that is cefiderocol, a licensed antibiotic in several countries, developed by a Japanese company, and this has demonstrated excellent efficacy against drug-resistant infections. But Dr. Ghafoor says that this drug is not available in the Indian markets. But then again, he says that with respect to emergency use approval, it should not be a one-size-fits-all kind of a solution. He sounds a note of caution, and he says that we must emphasize the importance of responsible and appropriate utilization of these medications. A collective decision by a team of experienced doctors, including infectious disease experts, should be made mandatory before initiating their use, meaning thereby emergency use approval should be the measure of the last resort. It should not be considered in a non-serious manner. If the condition of the patient merits such use, and the medical team and the medical experts are of the opinion that yes, emergency use should be allowed, then only these medicines and these drugs which are in their trial phase should be administered on the patient. Lastly, he concludes that by granting EUA for cefepime zidebactam, an Indian innovation, and cefiderocol, a globally recognized antibiotic, we can strengthen our arsenal against drug-resistant infections. Their inclusion in the EUA list would not only empower doctors but also instill a renewed sense of hope and confidence among patients and their families. As a nation known for its scientific achievements, we have the opportunity to make substantial impact on the world stage. So this article, although narrating in a way the story of that patient, but then again some important information is there and this would be helpful with respect to the science and technology component of the syllabus. Coming to the next, that is lessons from the facts over food grains. Now this is with respect to the scheme that was announced during the Karnataka election campaigning, that if the then opposition party, the Congress party, comes to power, then it would be implementing the free distribution of food grains scheme. Now, the author here identifies that what all has transpired since the formation of the government and what is the scenario now. Let's begin. Now, the Karnataka government's decision to convert the promised Anna Bhagya scheme to a direct benefit transfer temporarily has brought into focus the limits of state government's policy intervention on a crucial matter such as food security. Now, what is this Anna Bhagya scheme? Annabhagya scheme, under this scheme, the government has visualized the provisioning of providing 5 kg of free rice per person per month to 4.42 crore beneficiaries. Now, these 4.42 crore beneficiaries within the state of Karnataka included 45 lakh Antyodaya Anna Yojana beneficiaries, 3.58 crore priority household card holders, and 39 lakh cardholders belonging to Karnataka's own category of priority PHH, that is priority household. This was in addition to the regular entitlements to the beneficiaries under NFSA, that is National Food Security Act. And to fulfill this ambitious scheme, the state would have required around 2.3 lakh metric tons of rice every month to meet this commitment. Now, initially, FCI said that FCI, Food Corporation of India, said that they agreed to their demands, and they would be supplying the quantum of rice, the quantity of rice that is being demanded. But on June 12, the FCI had agreed on June 12 to supply the quantity of rice under this scheme, that this is Open Market Sale Scheme Domestic, OMSSD. And they said that FCI said that we are willing to supply the rice for the month of July, but the center had changed the central government changed the rules, and Anna Bhagya scheme ran into serious problems on June 13 when the Union Food Ministry discontinued the sale of rice and wheat under OMSSD, Open Market Sale Scheme Domestic, to all state governments, with certain exceptions here and there. Now, Karnataka, which had planned to use this rice that they would be procuring under this OMSSD, they had planned that we will be procuring the rice under this scheme OMSSD, and then they would be initiating and executing their scheme. But this could not happen. Now, what is the rationale behind this OMSS? OMSS is meant for the sale of surplus stock of wheat and rice at predetermined prices, and the mechanism used is the e-auctioning in an open market. Now, it is done to improve the supply of food grains and control the price line, to maintain the price stability and supply of food grains. And the states have generally been allowed to purchase the surplus stock without e-auction. Now, this has been the governing practice, you can say. Now what has changed? The OMSS now is limited to accommodate small and marginal buyers and traders only, and the quantity that a bidder can purchase in a single bid ranges from 10 to 100 metric tons at present. Now, this has been changed. Like previously, the state governments were having a good time because they could opt for this OMSS domestic scheme, but now the central government has changed, and the target beneficiaries of this OMSS scheme would be the small traders, and a cap has also been placed that what could be the maximum limit of purchase through the bidding process, and that is 10 to 100 metric tons. So this is the basis of the problem that has emerged. Now, the situation, please understand, the author highlights that has changed drastically post-COVID, and these changes, that were introduced during the time of COVID was because of the fact that the country came to a standstill because of the entire duration of lockdown. So, in the duration of the lockdown, to ensure food security, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana was initiated. This was implemented in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, but as of now, it is no longer in force. Now, what was this scheme? This scheme led to providing 5 kgs of food grains per person per month from the central pool to Antyodaya Anna Yojana beneficiaries and priority household beneficiaries, and this was implemented all over India. But this situation has changed. Why? Because pandemic to a large extent is over. Now, please understand that all the state governments implemented their own schemes in the wake of pandemic, like distribution of free food, grains, etc., etc. And they did so to some extent for gaining electoral successes. But they forgot one basic principle, that the principle or idea, that to what extent such schemes which provide free food, grains, and other things, to what extent they are sustainable. Now, the author in this article tries to highlight this important fact when he says that this episode has delivered a key message to the states that they must have their own mechanisms in place before launching any such scheme in the sense that providing free food grains. Now, the author tries to also incorporate the points that have been raised by the central government, the union government. The center indeed has reason to be worried. And why the center should be worried? It is because of the fact that if every other state promises a scheme of its own in food sector, based on the expectation that the central government and the CI will come to its rescue without any regard for the emerging realities, then what will happen? The entire system will crumble. If the states do not exercise discipline and such a trend goes unchecked, the country would not have comfortable stock, let alone surplus. So this is the point that is raised by this article. Again, an important piece of information with respect to the social security and social service component of the syllabus of the examination. Coming to the next news, and this has created big news, and this is related to the student debt crisis in USA. Now here I have highlighted two cases, Biden versus Nebraska 2023 and Department of Education versus Brown 2023. Now in the entire this newspaper article, the name of the case laws that have been decided, the cases that have been decided by the American Supreme Court, US Supreme Court, has not been mentioned. So I have mentioned both the cases over here for the benefit of the students. Now, what was this debt crisis all about? Please understand that in America, it is the central government, the American government, the federal government, which is the main funding agency or the main funding source for student loans. And why student loans are given? Student loans are given so that a particular student can avail those loans, can take those loans and go through a proper education, university education, and could have a better life in the future. So it is a government funded program. But then again, the idea is that if a student takes a loan from the government, the student has to repay the loan, the principal amount, as well as the interest. And the situation in America is that because the cost of education is increasing every day, what happens that the amount of loan, the load on an individual student, the pressure on an individual student regarding the load payment increases on a day-to-day basis. So let's see what has been the scenario. Let's see what the article says. Now, the President Biden has already released a new plan to cancel billions in student loans that after the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, this is Supreme Court of the United States, it is the full form, in a 6-3 decision on June 30, blocked its ambitious plan to cancel $430 billion in debt. Meaning, where this was the initial plan, that $430 billion, which was in student, which was equivalent to the student loan, which was the debt, the central government would be, the American federal government would be forgiving it. But then again, it went into legal hurdles, and these two were the cases, Biden versus Nebraska and Department of Education versus Brown, which were decided by the American Supreme Court on June 30. Now, this portion of the article deals that how big is the student loan. It talks about certain facts and figures, but we should be more concerned about the analysis. And here lies the analysis. In the U.S., the federal government is the primary source of student loans, running several loan programs to help the students and their families finance higher education. Now, how this system works, that how the loan once given to the student, how the student repays the loan as well as the principal amount of the loan as well as the interest. Now, what are the repayment options therefore? Now, once a student borrows a federal loan, they enter into a contractual obligation to pay the loan with interest. They can sign up for specific repayment plans with repayment period running into a decade or more, meaning thereby it would be 10 years or more for a standard repayment plan. Now, under a standard 10-year repayment plan, a borrower has to make 120 equal payments, 120 installments, you can say, EMIs, 120 EMIs of principal and interest spread over a span of 10 years. There is also another repayment plan which is very famous, that is income driven repayment plan. And President Biden and his administration and his team was targeting basically this income driven plan, the kind that President Biden wanted to alter in order to cancel student debts. Now, what is this idea? This is income driven repayment plan. Now, such a plan caps the monthly payment. Such a plan puts a upper limit on the monthly payment of installments at a percentage share of the borrower's income. How much the borrower is earning, on that basis the a percentage of that income is considered as the repayment of the loan that had been taken by that person when that individual was a student. Now, this comes this income driven repayment plan, when executed, the amount of the percentage amount varies from 10% to 15%, meaning thereby from a salary, from a person who is earning, say, XYZ amount of dollars, then out of those X amount of dollars, 10% would be going towards the repayment of the loan. Obviously, because the amount of monthly installments is getting reduced, the time period of the repayment, the time span required for the repayment of the entire student loan would be increasing to 20 to 25%. Now, what was the original plan of President Biden? This portion of the article highlights that the plan was supposed to cancel $10,000 in federal student loans for those individuals who are making less than $1,25,000 a year, or the households making less than $2,50,000. Now, college students qualified if the loans were disbursed before 1st of July, and the plan made 43 million borrowers, such a big number, 43 million borrowers eligible for some debt forgiveness, with 20 million possibly having their entire debt erased, meaning they were totally exempted from repayment, according to the Biden administration. Now, what would be the cost of having such massive loan forgiveness exercise? Now, as per the Congressional Budget Office, the program would cost about 400 billion over the next 3 decades, meaning thereby it would be running into 3 decades, that is 30 years. Now, the Department of Education also proposed to improve the existing income-driven plans, the information about which has been mentioned above, by capping monthly payment for undergraduate loans at 5%. Previously, it was say 10%. Now the Biden administration proposes to reduce it to 5%, meaning thereby what will happen? What will it lead to? The time span of repayment again will increase. 5% of borrowers' discretionary income, down from the current 10%. And the administration claimed that the plan, revised pay as you earn repay plan, would mean lowering of average annual student loan payment by more than $1,000 for both current and future borrowers. But then reality crept in, reality struck in, and what happened, that the proposal of Biden administration, went into legal hurdles, and there were two cases, as I have highlighted already, that came into picture. And what happened that when the matter went to the lower court, it was in the lower court. The lower court, rejected it. The information is given over here. The lower court rejected it. The lawsuits, which were filed by 6 states: Arkansas, Iowa, uh, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Carolina, the lower court dismissed the case, ruling that the states could not challenge the program as they were unable to show that they were harmed by it. But then what happened? The matter went into appeal, and the Supreme Court took the case up, and on June 30 decided against the Biden administration. So this was the situation that came into picture. But precisely what was the legal argument and in the court? So please understand that the cases that have been filed by the students, the case that has been filed by the student is this one: Department of Education versus Brown, 2002-3. This was the case that was filed by two students. And now in this case, the students argued that the Biden administration didn't go through the proper process in enacting the plan. And now, Texas-based U.S. District Judge Mark Pittman, who was appointed by the former President Donald Trump, is of the view that Biden administration overstepped its authority. Now, this is a legal opinion coming from a judge, district judge, that the Biden administration overstepped his authority. And what is the logic that is being given? Now, to cancel the debt, Biden government relied on the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act. Now, this act is also known as the HEROES Act, which has been enacted after the 9/11 attack. And this attack gives authority to the Secretary of Education to waive off or modify the terms of federal student loans. Please take a note of the legislation. The Act, Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, also called as the HEROES Act. When it was enacted after the 9/11 attack, and it gives the power to the Secretary of Education to forgive or waive off or modify the terms and conditions of the federal student loans. But the point is that this HEROES Act, this Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, can only be used in the situation of in the situation of war, in the times of war or national emergency. Meaning thereby the Secretary of Education can waive off the loans, modify the loans, forgive the loans, student loans, during the time of war or national emergency. Now, Biden administration considered COVID-19 pandemic as a national emergency. So the first legal hurdle that came into picture was with respect to the interpretation of what is an emergency. Now, war or other national emergency, and interpreting the term national emergency in such a way that COVID-19 is considered to be a national emergency, it did not go well with the Supreme Court. The court ruling, however, argued that the HEROES Act did not accord the Secretary of Education, the authority of mass debt cancellation. And the judge, Mark Pittman, said that it is only granted a flexibility during national emergencies, adding that it was unclear whether debt cancellation was a necessary response to COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is the legal point that comes into picture. Now, when this judgment came in on June 30th, the Biden administration, went into an exercise to find a solution to these problems, and the Biden administration said that we would be respecting the judgment, obviously, but then again we would be finding another way to implement this plan. Furthermore, the Supreme Court in its June 30 judgment also held that the administration, the federal administration, the Biden administration needs the permission from the Congress, the American Parliament, before undertaking such a costly program, because the amount of money involved is $400 billion, and that too it would be spread to, over the next 3 decades, next 30 years. Now such a massive spending, the government cannot take unilateral action, and the Supreme Court was of the view that the government should take the endorsement, the permission from the Parliament, that is the Congress. uh, uh, but now what is the response, as I was talking about, that what was the response of Biden administration? Now Biden administration, Mr. Biden himself, the president himself, announced that the education secretary has initiated a new rule making process for an alternative plan, and this time using the secretary's authority under the Higher Education Act 1965. Now, this Higher Education Act is the law which governs most of the student loan programs. So, the Biden administration is relying upon the powers that have been provided under the Higher Education Act to implement and execute their ambitious program. Now, this is the news that is related to what is called as the American administration, you can say, and how it is useful specifically with respect to current affairs, the questions relating to current affairs. This piece of information is beneficial. Moving on to the next piece of information, and that is the government to help combat child trafficking in border areas and to set up rehabilitation homes. Now, the government has decided to build infrastructure in border areas to counter the problem of child trafficking and to help in rehabilitation and protection of the victims. Now, all this infrastructure would be built along those areas, though in those states which are having international borders. And why this is so? Because we are having in certain states porous international borders, and this leads to increased human trafficking, specifically of women and girls. And they are given the enticement of having good life in India, but then most of these trafficked women and girls, they are forced into sex slavery, prostitution, and such other negative activities. Now, the state borders in these countries need to be more vigilant. The states bordering these countries, bordering the states which are having an international border with different countries, our neighboring countries, need to be more vigilant and have an adequate facility to provide relief and rehabilitation. And in order to aid this, the ministry will provide financial assistance. Now, Women and Child Development Ministry has been providing assistance to all the states under this Nirbhaya Fund, with the aim to the setting up of and strengthening of anti-human trafficking units, as in the short form called as AHTUs, in every district. And funding has also been provided for setting up these units. But now the funding has also been provided for setting up these units in the border guarding forces, for example, BSF and Sashastra Seema Bal. So, and then there's a piece of information that as of now, how many anti-human trafficking units are functional. Now, the human trafficking victims in border areas will also be produced before child welfare committees to declare them fit for availing sponsorship as per the Mission Vatsalya scheme guidelines, and accordingly the state and UTs will be requested to do the needful. Now, Mission Vatsalya is a central scheme focused on the protection of welfare in children. So these are the important pieces of information for today. I'll see you in the next session. Thank you very much.